What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 74, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name is Meowth, and as usual, I'm joined by my two good friends and co-hosts, Roffle and Corbett. How are you guys doing tonight?
You know, I'm doing good. I learned my lesson after last week, and no headwear this time. I was feeling a little under the weather, recovering from my COVID booster shot, so I was sleeping all day and wanted to hide my bed head, and I didn't hear the end of it pretty much all week. So here's my head, I guess. I don't know. How are you doing?
Yeah, I
Corb?
saw. I was watching the World Championship that's wrapped up this weekend, and in one of the games, I saw Gabby kind of wearing the same beanie look, and I was like, oh, he's going for the old Roffle, the classic, the classic Roffle move. But no, I'm doing good. I had a big week. I became a detective. Decided to give a big shout out to all the APM cheaters in the format, and got a little bit of attention on that. So we seem to have some bans are actually happening with a lot of the Ignite Mage gameplay going on, which is, a little bit overdue, but very happy to see it finally happen.
I've had a pretty awesome week just playing a ton of Hearthstone. I have been enjoying this meta. I put out a tweet where even if the same overtuned decks are overtuned, it feels like people are playing a wider variety of decks, and so I am enjoying playing the format a lot more. I mean, time will tell. We have balance changes I think have been confirmed coming soon, and so we'll see if any of those impact Wild and if they make the format maybe a little bit more of a balanced place. But I mean, overall, I'm still enjoying it, which is not something I could have said for most of United and Stormwind. So pretty excited for Hearthstone. I'm pretty excited for this episode, actually. We've got a pretty special one for you guys, as this will be our last episode of the year. I think we have done 48 episodes this year out of the 52 weeks. So I think pretty good with that. So we've got a pretty exciting one for you guys. We're going to be doing kind of a yearly recap of everything that has gone on in Wild Hearthstone. But before we get into all that, we do have some housekeeping stuff to take care of. So first things first, if you guys are enjoying the podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anything like that, make sure you guys drop a like, comment, subscribe. It's a small thing, but it does actually support us a ton.
You can also support the podcast by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/stateofwild and pick up some sweet perks in the process.
And of course, you can always come talk about everything Wild Hearthstone with the rest of the community at the State of Wild Hearthstone Discord server.
All right, let's hop into it. We've got a lot to talk about. And let's just start with kind of the big thing. This year, we saw more balance changes than we have ever seen before in the history of Hearthstone, including two of the very first bans in Hearthstone history for our format. And so I think we're just going to kind of hop through the year really quickly and just talk about cards that used to be. I think a lot of people, including ourselves when we were prepping for this show, kind of forgot that some of these cards used to be, like, they were nerfed this year because it feels like they were nerfed so long ago. But let's hop back. January of this year, we had Edwin got hit by that nerf bat after 6 years in standard and finally got nerfed from 3 mana to 4. And then we had the Dark Moon Races come out. We had Hysteria get released, 3 mana Hysteria, dual class card. And then for about a week there, this little 1 mana 1/1 became the terror of the Wild format in Tiller Warlock until we got Hysteria banned, and I think, or not banned, but nerfed, and I think 3 days. I think this was the fastest we had ever seen a card change, which was pretty insane. And then we finally get to the reverts and the core set. And this was maybe the biggest set of changes that we had ever seen in Hearthstone history. And I'm going to just run through some of the big notable changes, right? So Hunter, we got Flare back to 1 mana. We had Hunter's Mark back to 1 mana. Tracking they had reworked so that it no longer discards those other 2 options that you didn't play. Dino Tamer Brand got reverted back to 7 mana. And then the big thing, we got Starving Buzzard back. Starving Buzzard, finally playable in our format, 2 mana, 2/1. I know Corbett, Roffle, and I were so excited for this. I think I had never played as much Hunter as I did that 1 week with Starving Buzzard, which was pretty sick. Mage, we had Conjurer's Calling get reverted back to 3 mana. Paladin, I know Roffle wasn't the biggest fan of this, but Call to Arms got reverted to 4 mana, which is pretty sweet. A card that I was really excited about, Power Word Shield, got reverted back to its original card draw form. I was listening back to our episode last year, and I remember how sad we were when we were talking about Priest rework and how they killed our Power Word Shield, but we got it back with the reverts. And then Rogue, do you guys remember the outcry of Caverns Below going back to its OG original form of, play 4 minions and you get 5/5s for the rest of the game, and how it was going to ruin the format. You guys remember that?
It's exactly how it played out, right?
Exactly.
No, because I was on the other side of that fence saying, like, the quest was never good in Wild to begin with. Why would it be good now when things are even faster? So it was a ridiculous stance to take from the beginning, but like a lot of people fell into that trap.
Yeah. We also had Edwin going back from 4 to 3. His nerf lasted like, I think, 2 weeks. Blade Flurry kind of got partially reverted. So it was originally like 4 mana, and it got buffed back to 2, but it doesn't hit the opponent's face anymore. A revert that I absolutely hated, Necroreum Apothecary, went from 5 mana to 4. Absolutely hate it. Miserable. Still a miserable card to play against, even if it's not very good. And then we got those Galakron changes where the cards that you drew cost 0. Not super relevant, but we did get that. And then I think maybe the saddest change, and the one that people were maybe the most outraged about was the Shaman change to that hero power. Poor little Wrath of Air Totem, spell damage no longer. We got replaced with Strength Totem. That happened this year. We had that 1 week of, I think, Odd Shaman, where the hero power was bugged and still summoning Invocation of Air Totems, and so you still got to play Spirit Claws for about a week. And then we got Flame Tongue back to 2, and we got the whole bunch of reverts for that Galakron Shaman, which we'll be talking about in a little bit. And then we get to Warlock. So I think Drain Soul getting buffed from dealing 2 to 3 was a huge buff that we'll be talking about a lot throughout a lot of the decks that we're going to be talking about today. And then I think one of the best changes that they made was Lord Jaraxxus becoming a hero card and actually being playable again in Hearthstone, both in Standard and in Wild. And then Warrior, we got a whole bunch of changes, including Charge and Bloodsworn Mercenary and Scion of Ruin. But maybe the most important thing, Warsong Commander, kind of the laughing stock of the format when it came to nerfs, got buffed. But not to its original form. We only got Rush, which was really...
Forward.
Rush Forward. I hate it. I kind of wanted to see the chaos of Warsong Commander, especially now that we have like To the Front and Glory Chaser. And then a bunch of neutral cards got reverted. A lot that are actually seeing play in Wild. We had Leper Gnome, Undertaker, Knife Juggler, Albatross coming back to 3 mana, BGH coming back down to 4, I believe, like in between. Sarah Knight Chang'e came back, Fellwing came back, Dragon Queen Alexstrasza came back, a big fan. A lot of people that were a big fan of the Arena decks were really happy to see that. And so yeah, the whole big core set rework that they did brought a bunch of huge changes, and I think was very well received, including like just if you factor in those reverts. And it was kind of like a mini expansion in of itself with all the new cards that we got to play with in Wild. So how did you guys feel about that mini set looking back at it after a year?
Well, it's something that the community has been asking for a while, and so it's good to see them kind of take that feedback and actually implement it into the game. I know Brian Kibler of Brian Kibler Gaming, the Brian Kibler, in fact, who is always great, has been a huge proponent of this for a while. And it sets a really interesting precedent as well, because now it's kind of expected that they'll do this moving forward, as well as give the entirety of the set for free. So it's a very player-friendly change that they implemented, and one that I hope that they continue, and generally a trend in the right direction in terms of the accessibility of cards in Hearthstone. So I'm into it.
Yeah, I think that the core set, we are in its infancy, and so we can't really talk about the long-term effects of it. But no, I mean, overall, I think it's been a great success. I'm super happy with everything that we got with the core set. I'm super happy with the massive amount of reverts that we got alongside it, and I'm very, very happy for both these changes to be basically a yearly thing. I love it.
Yep. I'm excited for, speaking of reverts, I don't know if you guys have taken a look at some of the expansions that are eligible for reverts come in the next expansion, and I think we're going to have an even longer list to talk about next year potentially, which is kind of scary and kind of daunting, but we'll talk about that in a future episode in the new year as we get closer to reverts. But yeah, so core set came out, and then Forge of the Barons came out, and with Forge of the Barons we had a set of balance changes soon after, specifically nerfing a couple of the watch posts, specifically Far Watch Post for the WoW format. Went from a 2/4 to a 2/3. Big sat on that. But something that people were probably not so sad to see go was Penflinger got to no longer hit face, which was a big deal for Darkly Warlock at the time, but also stuff like Reno Priest and decks like that. Janus went from 5 to 6. Deck of Lunacy went from 2 to 4, so this was kind of that high roll spell mage in standard that people absolutely hated. And then we had Sword of the Fallen going from a 1-3 to a 1-2. Another really, really powerful paladin card there. That one you can actually blame Cora, I believe. So feel free to yell at her in the comments about Sword of the Fallen. But we move into a little bit later in Forge in the Barrens, and this is where we got maybe the most impactful set of balance changes when it came to Forge in the Barrens and Wild, specifically because we hit Springwater for APM Mage, went from 4 mana to 5. We had First Day of School and Crab Rider nerfed for Hand Buff Paladin, which was a pretty oppressive deck in Forge in the Barrens that we'll talk about. First Day of School going from 0 mana to 1, and Crab Rider only gaining Wind Fury on Battlecry. Hysteria going from 3 mana to 4, and then Mancrick, the card that maybe least impactful in Wild, going from a 3/10 summon to a 3/7 summon. But yeah, Forged in the Barrens, pretty insane set of changes here without even taking into account the buffs. And so I'll just talk about the buffs really, really quickly because there was only a couple that really, really mattered. So Razorboar going from a 2 mana 2/2, summon a Death Rattle that costs 3 or less from your hand to a 3/2. Deck of Chaos, a very important buff here, going from 6 mana to 5, becoming absolutely playable in both formats. And then last but not least, N'Zoth, God of the Deep, so Menagerie N'Zoth going from 10 mana to 9, which actually for a very long time in Wild prior to the quest, actually made N'Zoth, God of the Deep a very playable, strong card in our format. How are you guys feeling about all these changes that happened in Forge in the Barrens? Just kind of, I know we talked about them at the time, but pretty impactful nerfs that kind of took a lot of the luster out of Forge in the Barrens there.
Yeah, this is kind of representative of a clear shift in philosophy for the Hearthstone team, where they're more willing to act more regularly and more quickly after an expansion launches with this type of thing, because like watch posts were rampant in both formats for a while. Unfortunately, I think it did a bit more harm in Wild than good, just because like, yeah, Tax Paladin was annoying, watch posts were annoying, but like it was keeping Darkglare Warlock at bay pretty, as well as Secret Mage was pretty rampant at the time. So it was like doing a good job of attacking some of the decks in the metagame with it, and slowing things down a little bit in our format, which is, you know, a good thing at the time. And we kind of lost that pretty quickly after, and things just went back to the pre-Barons era, it seemed.
Yeah, as Roffle was saying, the majority of the nerfs are Wild. It was kind of a strange little thing where it was basically giving us an expansion and taking it away. That was sort of the big effect. So I don't know. Ultimately, it took away a lot of like very toxic gameplay and things like that with the watch post, but it ultimately left a format that was very samey. But don't worry, that changes very quickly once we move an expansion ahead, I suppose.
Yeah, so let's talk about United in Stormwind. So United in Stormwind came out, I think we don't have to say anything about these quests because I think they spoke for themselves. But yeah, so we got a huge set of changes, though, that were very impactful in Wild very quickly after United in Stormwind came out. So first thing that I want to talk about, we had Enchantress Flow going from 2 mana to 3. We had Darkglare going from a 2 mana 2/3 refresh 1 to a 3 mana 3/4 refresh 1. We had Battlemaster get nerfed/buffed from 5 mana to 6. Roffle's favorite card, Conviction, got nerfed from 1 mana to 2. And then Flesh Giant, a 2 series of nerfs, like the first one to 9 mana, and then it got bumped up another mana cost to 10. So all of these cards were very widely played in our format, and they did something, right? They just didn't really do enough, because very soon afterwards we got another set of balance changes that included a ban to the Demon Seed, which had basically taken over the format, and we'll talk about that again in a little bit. But this was, I believe, our second ever ban, right, after the Stealer of Souls incident that we kind of have glossed over. But yeah, Demon Seed, second ever ban. First quest got banned. And this is in addition to the nerfs to Ruined Mithril Rod and the rework to Elucia. So yeah, even with those nerfs, it still feels like United in Stormwind had an absolutely insane impact on the future of Wild, because we're still feeling the ramifications of that expansion even after we had some bans and a whole set of nerfs. I do want to mention, I know we had just recently had the new expansion Alterac Valley, but we had prior to the expansion coming out, a couple of changes, right? We had Battle Guard going from a 2-2 to a 2-3, and then Garrote, but none of those were really wild specific changes, but we are expecting changes coming soon. And as I wrap up all these nerfs, I just want to say this took a lot longer than I was expecting because, like we mentioned at the very beginning, there were so many balance changes this year, so much more than we have been used to seeing, and like I think Roffle said, signals a huge shift in their balance philosophy, which I am down for. I don't know if kind of the wider audience or even you guys kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I think generally it's a good thing. I think that there is a balance that they can reach, though, right? Because like it is disruptive for players that aren't super plugged into the Hearthstone community and aren't like well aware of this. There's still a lot of confusion when I play cards that have been nerfed, reverted, changed in some way about when that happened, why that happened, how that happened, that it happened. So like as someone who appeals to a bit more casual audience, like, you know, I think that there is some harm that can be done with that. But like for people that are playing the game competitively and especially standard gamers, I think that it's probably a good thing because like that's one of the benefits of a digital card game is being able to make these changes. I personally wouldn't mind it if they you know, targeted some of the cards that are wild exclusive or made some changes with the wild format in mind a little bit more frequently, like not as frequent as these changes necessarily, maybe like once an expansion would be more than enough and more than we've been getting. A lot of times some of these changes that impact the wild format are just kind of incidental, where it's just like kind of collateral damage that happen, or it's collateral damage that happens when they're nerfing something for standard, and then it's like perfectly healthy in wild. So I guess the benefit to that is that more nerfs that are fine cards in wild means more reverts later, so we get a new influx of cards potentially when some of these do rotate. So overall, I'd say it's a good thing, but that's like with my bias as somebody that's playing the game pretty regularly. It can make content creation a little bit difficult because, like, as of recording this, we know the balance changes are coming. We don't know what they are or when they'll happen. So it's like, so there's a little bit of I used to call it the lame duck period, but like again, Brian Kibler being great coined the term lame deck period, in which you have, you know, this period of time where like the metagame you know is going to change, but like you don't know to what yet, so it's just kind of an empty feeling of playing the game. So that's the part that I don't like about the balance changes, is like the uncertainty over what's going to happen, and that's just me as a content creator, though.
Yeah, for sure. Not that I'm like a big YouTuber or anything like that, but there have been like times that I've wanted to write a guide or make a video on something, and it's kind of been like, it'll get nerfed in 2 weeks anyway. Like what's the actual point? And it just means in terms of content creation, you have to be constantly just fine with the fact that your stuff is going to be probably irrelevant in a week or two. A lot of the time it happens, which can be very frustrating. But as a player, as a highly engaged player, yeah, I love the cadence. I think that this isn't just a big benefit of being a digital card game. This is the biggest benefit, being able to do this and to do things that you can't do in a game like Magic. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. I'm happy that it encourages them to take huge risks with game design, which is something that you need to be doing the longer a game goes on, because hey, the more Hearthstone we play, the more we've seen, and they need to keep doing weird shit to keep us highly engaged. They need to keep doing new stuff, and the fact that they can actively change things if they need to with such frequency gives the devs so much more leeway with that. So I'm a huge fan of that, especially as a wild player. You know, we want to see powerful stuff a lot of the time, even if it sometimes is a little bit too powerful.
Yeah, you just opened up a can of worms there with that statement, huh? But yeah, I mean, I'm with you guys. As somebody who plays the game and streams the game a ton, I love changes. I also just, I don't know, like Roffle said, I'd be okay with just more frequent changes to the powerful
maybe
cards,
some more changes.
More changes, so that the segment next year goes on for the entire episode. Yeah. But to kind of move on to the next part of our yearly recap, I will be handing off all the talking and responsibility to Corbett here, because he has done his homework and he is very well prepared for this. And he's going to give you a meta recap of what decks were powerful when during this entire year.
All right. Reading glasses on. Yeah, let's run it through, you know. I mean, we kind of already have kind of going through a lot of the nerfs, so we've sort of hit on some of the things that have gone on. But hey, let's get into it a little bit more detailed. So, bam, January. Basically like Secret Mage, Reno Priest, Glare, like those are the big decks that we're seeing a lot of. People are kind of bored because those have been the same decks we've been seeing for some time at that point. And, Madness of the Darkmoon Fair comes out. We see the rise of the farmer. Wretched Tiller comes out, and as Meowth said, one of the quickest turnarounds we've ever seen in terms of a nerf. I don't think it was quite 3 days, but I think they might have announced it within 3 days, and then by the time it actually happened, it might have been a week or so. So basically, yeah, it was same old decks, then Hysteria gets changed, and then we kind of just go back to the same old new decks, except Rogue's also good with Nitro Boost. So it was kind of in a little bit of a strange period where in Wild we were sort of just had experienced the same metagame for some time, but that wasn't going to last very long because then we get to the late April or late March and April, we get the rotation and reverts, which were obviously huge. Guys, this before touching it, do you remember your feelings specifically about the reverts? I know we just talked about it earlier, but what do you remember being scared of, or even really excited about that obviously didn't pan out or didn't work out the way that you might have expected?
I was terrified of 4-mana Call to Arms, and I was correct.
I was excited for 4-mana Call to Arms, and I was
you
correct.
were wrong. No, you were wrong.
I was in addition to Call to Arms though, I Starving Buzzard, right? I don't think I've been ever that hyped for a hunter card, ever. And then we because I didn't get to play with Sunshine Hunter with Buzzard because I didn't get to start playing until after Nax. Right, so I was playing Undertaker Hunter after Buzzard had already gotten deleted from the game, and so playing with 2-mana 2/1 Starving Buzzard was that was so much fun. And I don't think I played so much Beast Hunter that week that we had prior to the expansion, so I was really hyped for that card as well.
Yeah, I was hyped for it. I didn't know that it was going to necessarily be the powerhouse that it was at the time it was released, but I wasn't expecting it to. I was also just kind of looking forward to Undertaker shenanigans for the nostalgia. I again didn't really consider it a threat to the format, but I was just looking forward to it. I think the only one that I was really just opposed to, and still to a lesser extent, I think I still am, was the Call to Arms. I don't that was one of my least favorite metagames. So when it was initially introduced, so that was just my personal bias. But at the rate we're going now, I don't know that I have the same disdain for that card just because the rest of the format has sped up so much just in this past year. Because I think when it was initially released, I was yeah, I was right. This was a mistake. Now I'm at the point where everything else has caught up to it, and it's just well, I don't. Maybe it's okay now.
Yeah, I remember being terrified of 3 health Flame Tongue, and I was like, God, I hope they don't do that. That'd be way too much for the format to handle. And then in hindsight, it's that was a bit silly, given this how far we've kind of come.
I shared similar apprehension towards that, just because Even Shaman and the Even Shaman metagame, it was up there with the Call to Arms Paladin as one of my least favorite decks to play against, and absolutely my least favorite deck to play. That deck was the most Resident Sleeper deck ever, so I'm glad that it never came back.
Well, what about
getting? Oh,
what about? I was about to say, what about Serenite Chain Gang? Speaking of Shaman, that revert.
Oh, I was just happy about that one.
Yeah,
that one I was, because that was long overdue. Serenite did nothing wrong.
Yeah,
I mean, that was something that I thought was going to do something. And I mean, you say did nothing wrong. It didn't really do anything at all in Wilds for some time.
Well, no, I think it was just a strict upgrade for Shudderwalk Shaman over Doppelgangster, and I'm just I'm kind of okay with that.
Just about time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But let's jump into exactly why you might have hated the Call to Arms Roffle. Immediately out of the jump, in the expansion, Barons drops in early April. We also get Classic. We're saying that we didn't get to play with Starving Buzzard. Well, hey, Classic drops as well. And with Barons, we're talking about this Resident Sleeper meta, Reno Priest and Secret Mage and Dark Lair. Those last 2 decks pushed out completely because we have watch posts and taxes running around. Weblord becomes sort of a defining card in the format. Tax Paladin sort of comes in sweeping through. The meta is completely unequipped for it. We have Crab Rider as this win condition that you just buff it and we stop the opponent from playing any of these cards. And it's kind of like a really interesting deck that we hadn't seen before very much in Wild Hearthstone. It's kind of unique. Like, it's something that I think people are a lot more familiar with in Magic. This whole tax idea, death and taxes. But we hadn't really seen it. It was kind of a interesting direction for like a aggro control, whatever you want to call it. Just kind of a weird deck to pop up. But it didn't last very long because Watch Post was sort of handled and got nerfed very, very quickly in the first couple of weeks, which saw the rise of APM Mage. The deck that people immediately feared was Tier 0. In fact, I had a lot of fun with APM Mage. We'll get into that later when we talk about some of our favorite decks. But yeah, APM Mage ended up getting nerfed with Springwater. From that, Handbuff Paladin was the actual Tier 0 deck that people didn't quite know about. And yeah, once Mage got nerfed, Paladin got nerfed, we kind of just went back to where we were at. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, about how with the nerfs, things kind of just reverted in Wild. We went back to Dark Lair, we went back to Secret Mage, we went back to Reno Priest, and there was like Odd Pally was around because Conviction, good card. And basically we sort of went back to the same meta until the Wailing Caverns dropped in June. And the Wailing Caverns was basically Shaman, the mini set, because with the printing of one card, Primal Dungeoneer, Shaman got a huge upgrade, but not before we kind of, had this minor detour called Stealer of Souls, where there was a week of absolute hell on ladder, which ended up resulting in our first ever ban. So Stealer of Souls, very problematic for many, many reasons. People hated it, and they ultimately stepped in with a unique solution that they hadn't done before and did our first ever ban, which, much like the reverts they've done, really kind of changes the future of Wild. We kind of talked a lot about the ban process at the time and the kind of precedent that it set. Ultimately, how are you guys feeling about the bans as sort of the community perspective now on bans in general, and whether you think that this is ultimately the correct solution for Blizzard to go about this?
I think the community is still heavily divided on this. Some people, rightly so, don't like getting 134 card set in there in the format that they play. And I agree that is a bummer, but I think that the pros outweigh the cons. That, like, I understand that they can't consider Wild as the primary format, and so like a lot of the balance changes and a lot of the cards that they release are for the standard format. I would just hope that they step in and take some sort of action when that card is broken in Wild, and I think that the easiest way to accomplish that is just simply with a ban. So it feels bad. I understand why people don't like it, but I just feel that it's the best way to go about it, because I'm still very much against cards having the same name doing different things in different formats, because unironically too confusing for new players, and it just makes the Wild format less accessible in my opinion. And so I think that I don't have a better solution than a ban.
I mean, from my perspective, I think it is the correct option for a lot of the points that Roffle just mentioned. I do think that it has caused this whole issue of now every time a deck is super strong, where are my bans? Yeah. Where are my bans? Where are my bans? Which is like, I don't know how much different that is than people just complaining for nerfs every 2 seconds, but
it's just using a different word.
Yeah, but I do think that the conversation you brought up about it dividing the player base, I know that there are a lot of people in the community that kind of just want to play with an unnerfed everything Wild. Like Wild was supposed to be, so like unnerfed everything and just kind of see the chaos that ensues. It's not what I want, so I'm very glad that they step in and do nerfs and bans. But again, I think when they did that initial ban, they made a statement about how they're going to treat the format, and I am interested to see if that remains the same as we move into the next year or the year after that, because it was a very big turning point, right, when we saw that ban, like you mentioned. And yeah, I'm kind of excited and a little bit scared to see kind of what happens in regards to bans kind of moving forward, especially when we hit reverts for Stealer of Souls and Demon Seed, like, because they have mentioned that they're going to unban them and they might have to nerf them so that they might not be as big of a problem, and they'll do that when they they unban it, but we'll see. I'm kind of excited, a little bit scared when we get to that point.
Yeah, for sure. And you're right. Like a lot of time when people are talking about demanding bans, it is just a different label.
Hmm.
Like it's just a replacement word for nerfs. But yeah, you are right. The player base continues to be very divided, and that kind of conversation kind of heated up even more once we got the Stormwind in August. Now, with Stormwind, we didn't think it would have the biggest impact. I mean, no one's gonna actually play these quests in Wild, are we? Like, why? Why would we? It costs you a card in the mulligan. You're an aggressive deck if you're something like Warrior. Why would you just give up your 1-drop at a card in the mulligan? Yeah, wow. We may have missed the mark a little bit on some of those cards because it immediately dropped, and it turns out the quests were completely and utterly busted. The headliner basically being Warlock. The Dark Lair package, the Dark Lair deck that had been very, very dominant, except for that kind of blip in the tax paladin era, kind of got ascended to another level with the addition of the Demon Seed. It now had this off-board win condition that a deck like Arena Priest couldn't really stop. It discounted the Giants just as fast, not faster, and it kind of had this absolute absurd inevitability. And it was probably the most popular I think I've ever seen a deck in Wild at any point that I can remember. We came in and we kept doing our class check-ins, and it got as high as like, oh, today I saw like over 50% Warlock, and it was all just one deck, and it was pretty absurd. But yeah, once we moved on from Giants got nerfed, other fatigue lists popped up, and we kind of had these two dueling Demon Seed decks, and then more nerfs happened, and then eventually they just decided to go with another ban, with the Warlock quest. And even as the Warlock quest was getting banned, there were some concerns about what was going to happen in the future because, the question started to rise, like, is it just a quest Warlock problem? Is there something kind of going on that's a bit more pervasive, I suppose, with the entire meta and the future of Wild? We had a really interesting episode with Ridiculous Hat that I think was a really, really great one to just kind of talk about Wild as this big sort of, the entire format and what the future holds and everything. But regardless of that, once Warlock got nerfed, Hunter, Warrior, and Warlock kind of became these three dominant forces. We had the mini set delayed because Mercs is now a format. We got our first look at that whole type of game in Hearthstone. Very exciting. And yeah, then the mini set came out. Not a really ton of a lot changed in that entire time period. Basically, things like Ignite Mage popped up, Dark Lair popped up a bit more, but it was really just a lot of those quest decks and even Warlock is sort of the big force in the format. And that's kind of where we get to now. We just had an expansion drop a few weeks ago. Free Shaman is apparently the new big bad in a lot of people's eyes. And, we have some things like Handbuff Paladin. We have some hero cards that are out. There's kind of some Ignite Mage stuff going on, some controversy. And, we're about to have some nerfs in just a couple days. It just got delayed because of the World Championship, which just wrapped up. But that's where we are today, guys. There's the entire year in review. It was kind of interesting going back and just seeing exactly what happened throughout the year and a lot of the big events and kind of looking back on things that either nerfs happened or metas that happened or just decks that I'd basically forgotten existed. So just really nice to go back and look at everything.
Yeah, as we're going back, I think at one point each of us had a moment of, oh, right, that happened this year too, where like there's a lot going on this year. And yeah, the Hearthstone year doesn't quite line up with the calendar year, but like the 2021 calendar year had a lot of things happen within it. And I think for the most part, they were largely good. I think, you can make an argument about the United and Stormwind being like,
Tipping point?
a difficult, the tipping point, I think,
Yeah.
is probably a good way of kind of defining it. But like, other than that, like a lot of these changes are, I think, steps in the right direction. And, if we can hopefully get some sort of course correction in the future with some of the United and Stormwind power level, or at least, something to offset that in other classes so that we're not stuck with those same three decks for the rest of our lives. I think, again, leaves me pretty optimistic for Hearthstone moving forward, seeing some of the positive changes that did happen, especially in that first, half to 2/3 of the year.
Yeah, I kind of want to hop back to United and Stormwind because I think this is a really interesting conversation. Where I know last year when we were having this, and it was just me and Corbett, and we had not United and Stormwind, Skullman's Academy came out, and we were talking about how like Wild was on this trajectory, and then we like had Skullman's, and it like ratcheted up the power level to the next tier, and then we were kind of we went on this like constant little trajectory, and then we hit United and Stormwind, and I think United and Stormwind for me ratcheted up the power level of this format so significantly that even with I don't really want to hop into this nerfs and bans conversation on this episode, but like even if they do step in and make changes, like United and Stormwind has kind of fundamentally changed the landscape of Wild for the foreseeable future, right?
Yeah.
Until something more busted comes out, which is very scary to me, and primarily because I didn't enjoy what power level got ratcheted up, if that makes sense. Like the style of decks and the way that Hearthstone was played in those powerful decks was not something that I like thoroughly enjoyed in Wild. I think Standard was a completely different story, but if I'm looking just at Wild and I'm looking at specifically like quest lines, right? Like I'll just like the quest lines I think are fundamental issues for me personally. I know Corbett might not have the same opinion, but I do kind of want to open up this conversation of like United and Stormwind in Wild. Did it do more harm than it will ever do good? I guess is my question to you guys.
I think that it's hard to say that so shortly after.
Yeah.
Right now I'm gonna go with yes, and that's just like a visceral reaction because I'm just like anybody that's watched my stream in the past 2 weeks has seen my reaction to facing the countless pirate warriors that I've been queuing into. So yeah, absolutely, I think so. That said, like we have seen these shifts in power level before, like and even back to back with something like Knights of the Frozen Throne followed immediately by Kobolds and Catacombs. Like that was a massive uptick in the power level. So this isn't necessarily unheard of, but the thing is that those were still two very well received expansions, even at the time of their release. Just because I think, like what you said, Meow, that it's the ways that they ratcheted up the power level. You had like things like Voidlord and late game demon cheating from Q block and that kind of thing. Even a Lunith wasn't just like out the gate the card that it eventually became. It was definitely very good, but it took some time for people to like tinker with it and settle on a list, and then Secret Mage eventually got some more support, and that's what really took the card over the top. So we've definitely seen these upticks in power level before, but it's like, I don't know. The United and Stormwind felt different, I think, because of the consistency of questline decks, and then the consistency, the speed at which they get online, and the inevitability that they provide. I think that's the one consistent thing across all of the questline decks that are relevant in Wild, and I think that is something that for me at least presents a little bit of a problem, and like I don't know, does give me some concern about the format moving forward, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure like a set like KNC was necessarily that well received. I think it's sometimes easy to, the further we get away from something, to forget about the complaints at the time. Like we did have 5-mana, like a 5/5 Corridor Creeper that was sort of tearing up the format there for a bit over a month. So we did have like kind of huge issues, I think, with the recruit mechanic as well, just in that specific expansion. But yeah, like I think back to Meowth's original question, like did this kind of do irreparable damage basically to Wild? Yeah, probably. I mean, it's like Gen Baku, but I mean, in a lot of ways, it's kind of just like Gen Baku, but in a specific way that makes people detest them even more in terms of the sort of the late game value that they generate. Sort of locks out a lot of the slower decks. But in terms of like the Gen Baku problem of like these things defining the entire format and it kind of changing the direction of Wild fundamentally for a very, very, very long time, I think that's all like very accurate. And yeah, this isn't something that you can just probably nerf like 2 cards and hope for the best. I think that there'll probably have to be a lot of changes. And hey, we might get a lot of changes that's happened to line up in Wild. Like Roffle was talking about the nerfs earlier and about how sometimes changes in standard just inadvertently kind of affect wild. And it does seem like that might be something that is going to happen this time, based on some comments from Celestalon. We'll see whether things kind of just happen to incidentally hit wild decks. But yeah, I mean, overall, Stormwind kind of did more damage, and we'll have to wait until the second expansion next year, apparently, to see what what the next trajectory looks like.
Yeah. I am being very hyperbolic on purpose just for the sake of content, because like using language like that I feel like is a little bit dangerous, but I don't know. I am a little bit scared, and I think you hit on a very important point though, where like it's not just nerfing the quest. I think United and Stormwind kind of exposed a lot of issues, and like whether you want to call them issues, maybe a lot of people might not, but like I don't think you can just touch two quest lines and the format's automatically a beautiful place again, right? Like I think there are a lot it did a lot to the format. Maybe it did a lot of good. I think there were a lot of really, really cool cards. I don't want to just be all super negative about United and Stormwind, but just kind of in general, the trajectory that it turned the WoW format onto. It's not something that I think was the best. And of course, I don't think either three of us are game designers, unless you guys all have closet professions that I don't know about. And so this is just the opinion of three guys on a podcast, and we're not game designers for a reason. So I'm just going to put that one out there. But yeah, that all being said, that is our yearly recap. Whole bunch of nerfs, buffs, bans, and a recap of the meta. And so I think it's time to move on to the second part of our show here, which are our annual awards. And so normally what we do here is we give out some awards for each class, and where we go through and we talk about the most powerful cards from each of these classes. Okay, each class got a ton of cards. Demon Hunter a little bit more than everybody else, but a lot of them were really, really powerful. When we went back and looked at them, and it was really hard to pick a top 4 nominees, let alone the winner for some of these classes. And so I'm excited to hop into it. Let's just hop into Demon Hunter really, really quick. And I love how I said that, and then Demon Hunter, it was really hard to find 4 cards to put on this list, because, man, when I went through and looked at these cards, I realized that there's a reason that Demon Hunter has been dead in our format for a very, very long time, because they just did not get anything good this year. Like, they got Deathspeaker Blackthorn, which is like the 7 mana 3/6 summon 3 death rattles that cost 5 or less from your deck. Very, very powerful card. Very, very strong in that Death Rattle Demon Hunter archetype that was like fringe playable for a while at the end of Forges and the Barrens. We had Irebound Brute, Brute Me Dude, the 6/7 with Taunt in kind of that glide quest Demon Hunter style deck. We had Illidari Studies. This is the 1 mana spell, discover an outcast card. It costs 1 less. Very similar to stuff like Nature Studies. And then we had Fellfire Deadeye. So believe it or not, this is a Demon Hunter card too, not just a Hunter card. But it was the 2 mana 2/3. Your hero power cost 1 less. So in Demon Hunter, it makes your hero power cost 0. So those are our 4 nominees for the most powerful Demon Hunter cards of this year, which makes me a little bit sad. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. But yeah, I mean, we're looking at these 4 cards, kind of Demon Hunter in general, just looking back at the year. Yeah, you guys have any opinions about this that are not just
This
brutal?
this made me so sad, Meowth. Like, when we were trying to pick these, oh my god, it was actually just traumatic. I don't know. Demon Hunter's been at a death spiral basically since like Baku, since like old Demon Hunter became kind of irrelevant, because that was kind of a lot of what it had going on. There was kind of a blip where like Death Rattle Demon Hunter kind of looked like it might be a thing, but that quickly got pushed aside with the release of Stormwind and everything. So Demon Hunter, it's kind of funny where there was this huge concern when Demon Hunter first came out about how the hell is this class meant to compete in Wild? Like, how are they meant to balance it in Standard? And it's not going to have the card pool as every other class. Like, how is this going to make any sense for this to be a Wild viable class? And in the first year, it was like, oh, we were just completely wrong. Like, oh, Demon Hunters are the nuts. It's like one of the best decks in the format. It's great. But no, this is kind of like the end result. This is sort of what we expected. This huge lack of options kind of like catching up to it. And now it's kind of this awkward situation, whether it's going to have to be reliant on reverts, or whether there's going to have to be some weird synergies, that pop up that we're not thinking about. Other than that, there's not really a great path forward for this class. It's kind of just depressing.
yeah, basically the opposite of what everybody thought would happened, where people thought, oh, it's going to be super weak out of the gate because like it doesn't have a large card pool. Then over time it'll begin like competing a little bit more as it like its card pool expands. But like the exact opposite was true, is way too powerful out of the gate and had to be toned down, nerfed to the point of near obscurity before it started picking up some more new cards, and did gain a little bit more with some of the faster odd demon hunter builds. But then just like as other decks, like I mean, the fact that we struggled so much to even come up with 4 good cards for it, like the fact that Felfire Deadeye is on this list is indicative of like the quality of cards that they've gotten this expansion. So yeah, like I think it's just kind of a like it just hasn't gotten cards that are on par with the level of other cards in the in the format.
So with all of that being said, I think it's about time to announce our winner for the most powerful Demon Hunter card. Maybe not the great honor that it might seem, given the quality of the competition. But our winner for the most powerful Demon Hunter card of the year is Death Speaker Blackthorn. A card that I didn't even know should be Demon Hunter when it came out, because I thought it was supposed to be a Hunter card. But here it is. 7 mana, 3/6. Kind of the build around card for these Death Battle Demon Hunter style of decks, right? Like it is a reason to play Death Battle Demon Hunter, even if it is not very good. But yes, congratulations to that Death Speaker Blackthorn for the great honor of best Demon Hunter card of the year.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great job.
You did it!
Yay!
All right, so moving on, we've got Druid, and the 4 cards that we landed on for Druid are Celestial Alignment with a nod to Lady Anaconda, because these two kind of go hand in hand. They represent a bit of a package for combo Druid decks. Following that, we have Lost in the Park, the quest line for Druid, which we all thought was underwhelming until we actually played with it, and it became like a 1-card counter to odd hunters that were popping up at the beginning of United and Stormwind. I think this is one of the only acceptable quest lines that we landed on. Next up is newly released Wildheart Guff. Has enabled an entirely new deck with the Cthulhu Druid that I believe we've talked about recently. I've definitely played recently, and also is just another good card in Celestial Druid deck. So you just run that card and you're kind of happy in slow Druid decks. And then finally, we'd be remiss not to talk about Token Druid, which has a variety of different playstyles in Wild. We've seen it in spells, full aggro. But the one consistent factor is the inclusion of Arbor Up, which is an incredible card in those decks. Even better when you can Solar Eclipse it. It provides burst. It brings you back on board. It does a lot of things that those decks want. And the winner, perhaps unsurprisingly, ends up being Celestial Alignment, which we've seen a lot of different alignment decks over the course of its release. All of them are pretty much just like 26 cards plus the combo, and like choose your favorite combo and then win the game. So yeah, incredibly powerful card. It was hard to imagine a time when like Aviana-kun combos would not be the thing in Druid, but like a single card kind of replaced a 2-card combo, so why wouldn't you go with that?
Yeah, it seems very likely that Celestial Alignment, big congrats, is going to go hit up the town, potentially go on a huge bender, just, have a great time, and then suddenly kind of wake up with a hangover and it might cost 9 mana. I don't know, like that seems where we're going in a day or two. But yeah, like Lost in the Park, I think is one that people might be caught a little bit off guard by, but I think being able to like push an entire archetype sort of by yourself has been really good. And yeah, Arbor Up is a very, very strong, I think, potential runner-up. Arbor Up kind of did a ton for aggressive and token druid styles, and is one of just the consistently like best cards in those decks. So yeah, druid kind of just like looks a little bit of this different than it ever has before, right? Because of that Aviana-kun change and the opening up of these token strategies, but mostly it's kind of either like just aggro, combo, token. Those kind of like the 3 fundamental things the Druid has going on. And they kind of, in all ways, got a little bit of an upgrade throughout the year.
Yep. I will say, Arbor Up, shout out to maybe one of my favorite cards from the year, like just because of how flexible it is, and like how many different decks you can play it in, and how just like good it is in all of those archetypes. So shout outs to Arbor Up. one of my favorite cards, making up for the fact that Druid also got maybe one of my least favorite cards in Celestial Alignment, and I'm looking forward to the potential nerfs. Unconfirmed, obviously, but I'm looking forward to a 9-mana Celestial Alignment.
Yeah. Not confirming anything yet. But yeah, let's move on to the class that hates Druid almost as much as Meowth hates Alignment. Let's talk about Hunter. So the nominees here for Hunter. Number 1, Piercing Shot. Next up, we have Defend the Dwarven District. We have Aimed Shot. And the final nominee is Fell Fire Deadeye. And in a shocking turn of events, the winner for the best Hunter card throughout the year is Defend the Dwarven District. Oh my god! Let's try that one more time.
Don't cut that.
And the winner is Defend the Dwarven District. Wow, amazing. Yeah, love it.
It's simultaneously the best Hunter card of the year and the worst Hunter card of the year. How about that?
I would edit out the flubbed announcement of the winner if everybody didn't already know who the winner was going to be. So I think it's okay to leave it in. I still vividly remember, by the way, when we were doing our United and Stormwind previews and we were like looking at these cards and we were like, yeah, this is going to be a fun meme version of Hunter. It's going to be cool, but it's like worse than Razapri, so there's no reason you would ever play it. And here we are. Hunter has a tier 1 deck that everybody hates, and I never thought I would say those words out of my mouth in the WoW format. Like, it's a very good card, and it's not a meme.
I was also reminded just this week in my YouTube comments about the fact that I predicted that Odd Hunter would be the worst version of the questline decks. I think we all predicted that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, I was wrong. I've admitted it many times. I was wrong. Nobody's right. Like, why are you bringing this up? I was wrong. I've said I'm wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, nobody's ever 100% correct at the beginning of an expansion. What do you want from me? Yeah, I was wrong.
Ruffle,
so are you.
You can never trust anyone who's ever wrong about anything. You know, that's why you just have to never acknowledge your mistakes.
I know.
Acknowledge them. Yes.
They presented it as like some kind of gotcha too, where it's just like, yeah, I've said that many times. I've not been shy about it. I was wrong. I was very wrong about all of the United and Stormwind quests. Would you like me to list the ways in which I was wrong? Because I'm happy to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what the show is a lot of time.
Very true.
At least I was right about Deck of Chaos.
Well,
no need to go there. Come on.
There's still time.
Copium. I will say, I think that if Kolkar Pack Runner was still 2 mana, I think there might be a conversation of like the non-odd version, because the non-odd at least gets 30 playable cards. The odd version of the deck has like 24 playable cards.
You're wasting 2 mana on a card that doesn't progress your quest line. So no, I'm gonna shut you down right there. No, it's not better. It wasn't better.
All right, Kolkar Pack Runner revert, and we'll see who's really right. Come on.
I think there's one way that like the non-odd version gets better, and that's if we nerf Rapid Fire to 0 mana. I think that'll be it. And then the non-odd version can definitely win out.
Or even give it the Twin Slice treatment and nerf it to 2 mana and like increase its cost. Like that might be too slow.
2 mana deal 2 with twin.
But
Anyways.
I just remember like going through these decks and seeing the early theory crafts, and we had things like Baited Arrow in the in the Odd Hunter, and just we thought that at the time is that what would happen is that if you push the curve too low, you would complete the quest and then you'd have no cards left, and there would just be no way to actually kind of kill the opponent. But I kind of think that with things like Flare being reverted, that ended up being a huge deal. Just having these like one mana sort of Catricks, aren't they called, or something? You guys know Magic and cantrips. Yeah, that's the one. What did I say? Catricks? I have been playing way too much Hunter. But it's just kind of how it worked out. You don't actually need any cards because with the Odd Hunter hero power, you just kill people so quickly. But yeah, overall Hunter had like a pretty decent year. Just a lot of these damage spells ended up being very relevant, and there's so much burn stuff going on in the class. So well done Hunter.
I mean, we're talking a lot about Odd Hunter. I do want to do like honorable mentions to Even Hunter, because I think this is a deck that's like constantly slept on. We talk about it all the time on the podcast, but like we memed on how like Fellfire Deadeye had to be included in Demon Hunter and how horrible that is, but like Fellfire Deadeye and Even Hunter is like actually insane. Like, it's such a good card in that deck. And then Piercing Shot giving you that finishing power. I have been a true fan of Even Hunter for the longest time, so I just wanted to make sure that I got an honorable mention here when all we've been talking about is Odd Hunter. So just wanted to put that out there. But let's move on into Mage, and as we go through these Mage nominations, I think you're going to see a very, very clear trend of what cards were super powerful. And
I thought you were going to say that. I thought you were going to say the trend was that I had a massive smile on my face as you talked about all of this.
that too, because these are all APM Mage, Spell Mage style cards. So starting with 4 mana Spring Water, so we're talking about unnerved Spring Water. Very often was gain a mana crystal or two as you draw 2 cards when you combine it with Enchanter's Flow and Source's Apprentice. We have Hot Streak. So this is a card that I personally slept on, but Corbett saw the potential of this with in combination with Molten Reflection, combining it with Source's Apprentice or Flame Wakers or even Chandler's in Ignite Mage. Very, very powerful card here. And then we're going to talk about Ignite in kind of combination with Chandler because they both got released at the same time. And there was obviously some intended synergy with those 2 cards, but has given rise to a whole new archetype here in Ignite Mage. Controversy ignored. Okay, the archetype itself has been born with Ignite and Chandler. And then obviously we have to include Conjure Mana Biscuit in here, very similar to Spring Water, where it ended up just being mana gain on your pop-off turns with Ignite and APM Mage, and even Mizaki Mages for a short period of time there as well. So yeah, as I mentioned, very obvious trends here. All cards that Corbett has absolute love for, except for maybe Ignite. Yeah, but that all being said, we do have to pick a winner here. And I think very clearly the winner has to be Refreshing Spring Water, where it was a gain 1, gain 2 mana, draw 2 cards from your deck. Absolutely insane. And even at 5 mana, it's still a very, very gross card, which kind of tells you how powerful it was at 4. And at this point, I would like to hand off the mic to Corbett so we can do a little victory victory speech here for his babies when it comes to those Spell Mage archetypes.
I'd like to thank Sorcerer's Apprentice for always being in my opening hand. I'd like to thank Luna for drawing me into my entire deck. And yeah, I would have, of course, liked to thank 4 mana Spring Water for being absolutely busted out of the gate. APM Mage was kind of a deck that was popping up a little bit before the release of Barons. Yes, that's the expansion. But then once it got Spring Water, things kind of went to another level. So, like Meowth is saying, the ability to kind of like not just get freebie draws, but actually gain mana with the Spring Water was kind of just absolutely insane. It made like turn 4 pop-offs super, super consistent at the time. But yeah, overall, Mage had a pretty good year, I would say. Like, at least in terms of like pushing these sort of combo-centric archetypes, it was kind of something that had been kind of put on the shelf a little bit after Quest Mage had been nerfed. This type of archetype in Wild, and then they heavily brought it back with a lot of the support they were kind of trying to give Spell Mage and Quest Mage in Standard. So, I don't know. Big rip to Big Spell Mage, which couldn't even get on the top 50 Mage cards, apparently, or anything close to that. But instead we had all of these archetypes instead. So yeah, good year for Mage and all the combo enthusiasts out there.
Good year. I hated all of these cards that got released. I hated them all.
I don't remember being that high on Hot Streak, by the way, but I will happily claim being correct about that one.
No,
I had it in your top 5 was powerful, I think.
I vividly remember you saying that it was going to be good because of its Molten Reflection interaction.
I'm so good then. Yeah, good.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Moving on to Paladin, which had its own problems this year and was broken in its own way at various points. The first card we talked about earlier was 1 mana Conviction, which was in fact too powerful. So it did eventually get nerfed. But when it was at 1 mana, it was basically a 1 mana fireball for a lot of decks in the format, and like single-handedly like gave certain decks a viable win condition. Paired with that, we left it off the list of 4, but like we couldn't not talk about Night of Anointment, which was a great way to draw your 1 mana Conviction so that you could draw your win condition very consistently. But unfortunately, like Paladin got some very good cards and it was left off. So the 1/3 Sword of the Fallen, also too good, just had to be nerfed. And still a playable card as a 1/2. So again, indicates how strong it was on release. And then following that, we have Alliance Banana Man, who really helped just give another buff option for hand buff paladin, but is just like also generally a good card in like minion based paladin decks. Like you want to kind of run it in Libram paladins, you just run this card when it makes sense, and it makes sense a lot. Speaking of, a card that makes sense in just about every paladin deck is Lightforge Cariel, recently released. The card just does a lot of things. It halves damage, it gives you 2 damage every turn, and it makes big guys in your hand that you can then put into play. So like, yeah, this card has been bonkers early on. Like the fact that it's a pretty much like no think inclusion in something as fast as even like a tax paladin, while being one of the better cards in hand buff paladin, just like indicates how strong of a card it is when there are many good cards in hand buff paladin. That said, strongest paladin card of the set has to go to One Mana Conviction. That card just did so many things in so many different decks. So yeah, claps in the comments for One Mana Conviction. And thank God it's not 1 mana anymore.
The fact that it's winning the most powerful card of the year means nothing and should be completely ignored when we go to revert cards and give me back 1 Mana Conviction.
No. I agree, Meowth. Same with Spring Water. Yes?
Shit. All right. No. All right, I take it all back. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, Paladin. I mean, Paladin had a hell of a year, dude. Like, Paladin had an incredible year with it all kind of came together with the tax Paladin archetype, but then all of a sudden, like, hand buff Paladin was nuts. And just throughout the year, it just kind of kept on picking up these really cool tools. Like Roffle was saying, the Conviction being this super huge burst finisher in Paladin was something that Paladin didn't like really have a lot of access to. Something like Odd Paladin was very reliant on kind of just Leroy, and that was sort of it. But all of a sudden, these decks picked up so much burst with 1 mana Fireball, and it kind of just changed everything. So yeah, Paladin got just a hell of a set. Like, I think Cariel, Cariel ain't gonna make it, dude. Cariel ain't making it until the next expansion, I don't think. That card's absurd, but yeah, overall, big shout outs to Paladin, all the different archetypes and stuff that it got pushed throughout the year. And next up, we have Priest. Priest. We have the first nomination is Void Touched Attendant. Next up, we have Twilight the Scepter, Dark Bishop Benedictus, and finally, we have 3 mana Hysteria. And the winner for the best Priest card throughout the year is Void Touch Attendant. Whoa! To the surprise of basically no one. Yeah. It might be the best 1-drop that we've seen in I don't even know how long.
The best 1-drop since Northshire Cleric, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, there's definitely a theme here with the Priest cards, like the Shadow Priest cards that they got were all like super, super strong. And Hysteria, when that was a 3, was also, also quite busted, whether it was in, Reina Priest or whatever. But Void Touch Attendant, just being able to push that much damage and kind of like single-handedly elevate this whole like aggro priest archetype, it's been pretty crazy. So yeah, the aggro priest meme, no longer a meme. The dream is real.
I like you were just mentioning about Lightforge Cariel. I would be very surprised if Void Touch Attendant made it to throughout the entire next year without being hit, because the card's just gross. All right, and so let's move into Rogue here. So Rogue not having as good of a year, I think, in Wild compared to its standard counterparts, where in Standard they got Octobots and Field Contact and Garrote, and people were super excited about it. But in Wild, maybe not so much. We're looking at Blackwater Cutlass, the 1 mana 2/2 tradable weapon that when you trade it discounts a spell in your hand. We have Shroud of Concealment, basically an Arcane Intellect in these combo Rogue decks. Speaking of combo, we have Scabs, Cutterbutter, kind of the card that enabled the Pillager OTK style Rogue decks. And then last but not least, we have the 1 mana Nitro Boost Poison. It's kind of crazy. We were talking about this. Nitro Boost Poison came out this year, guys, which was actually insane. And 1 mana Nitro Boost Poison. So this was a Rogue Warrior dual class card, but it was basically a Rogue card. And it single-handedly made stuff like Odd Rogue and Kingsbane Rogue, these like tier 1 archetypes at the time. And so with that all being said, it should be no surprise that the winner of the best Rogue card of the year goes to Nitro Boost Poison. And it is a card that I very dearly hope gets reverted in a few months here, because Kingsbane Rogue and Odd Rogue would love the help
It was a card that was frustrating to play against when it was released, but I think is probably a safer inclusion in the metagame right now.
I forgot how good Kingspan and Odorok were. Like before we kind of like did the little bit of a recap and stuff, researching before the show, it kind of blanked just how much this single card carried both those archetypes.
Yeah. Like in combination, I think in Rogue we had like Cutting Class as well that came out at the same time, and that combination of cards was insane. I would love to see how Kingsbane looks now if we got back Nitro Boost Poison.
I think next up we have the Shaman class, which, as you know, we've talked about many times this year, has had a great year. Especially the back half of the year has been pretty disgusting for Shaman. So it was a little bit difficult to narrow this down. We wanted to include about 1 million honorable mentions. We did cut it down to 4-ish, 5. We've got first up Firemancer Flurgle, then Primal Dungeoneer, the savior of the wild format for a brief moment, Brilliant Macaw, which further bolstered that deck, Windchill and Sleepbreaker from the last expansion. Again, these are two cards that are kind of inseparable. They're like, Windchill is good independently, and then Sleepbreaker gives you more Windchill, so it's also good. And then finally Snowfall Guardian, which was, I think, overlooked by a lot of people early on with free Shaman builds, and then ended up being arguably the best card in the deck, especially when paired with Brilliant Macaw. But we decided there's a little bit of discussion around this about what would win, but I think in the end, Firemancer Flurgle won out just because of his ability to clear the board. And really the flexibility of the card too, because Murloc Shaman was a thing for a while when Barons first released, and part of that was like Flurgle allowed the deck to get back on board, especially when paired with the Lushwater Scout. So like I don't think we can discount the fact that Murloc Shaman was actually like a solid tier 2 deck for a brief period of time. And then obviously the Toxfin shenanigans. And what we decided on is that, like, for the most part, like, Primal Dungeoneer is in part good because it fetches your Flurgle Toxfin. So like it all kind of came back to Firemancer Flurgle.
Yeah, I think the only class we have 2 classes here that we kind of broke our rule and had 5 nominations for, just because it was, like Roffle mentioned, there are so many good cards. We could go on and on about all the really, really strong cards that Shaman got this year, which is what a beautiful place for a class to be in the format. That was, I think, last year when we were talking about this was dead in the water, right? It was there with Hunter and Demon Hunter at the very bottom of the format, and 1 year of good cards, and we're talking about maybe one of the best classes in the format. I don't know. I love all of these cards on this list, though. Like, I'm looking at them, and I'm like, I love playing with all these cards. They're all really, really cool. Except for Flurgle, which is just broken with Toxin.
You better get those Snowfall Guardian games in quickly, Meowth, if you really like it that much.
Is it a problem in Standard?
I wouldn't be surprised, but that's a speculating.
All right, anybody listening to you, get your free Shaman games in while you can.
And next up we have Warlock. Warlock probably had the most controversial year, I think, when it comes to a lot of the cards. Because, hey, got 2 bans, and we have to mention those first of all. So, first up, we have 4 mana Stealer of Souls, the first ever ban in Wild Hearthstone. Next up, we have the Demon Seed, second ever ban in Wild Hearthstone. For the other nominees, we had 3 mana Mithril Rod, Backfire, and, like Meowth said, we kind of broke our rule. We went to a 5th one. Touch of the Nath was in. So, once again, this is Wild Hearthstone. Warlock had a hell of a year. But the winner is the Demon Seed. Shocking, right? So big congrats to the Demon Seed being the most powerful card in Warlock. It was one of the most broken decks that I think we can think of ever in the format, it feels like. Pushed 2 different versions of the deck with the Giants and the Fatigue list. And hey, it also pushed social media into an absolute and total frenzy and single-handedly kind of created a whole bunch of conversation about what exactly Wild is and all that kind of thing. But yeah, incredibly powerful card, second of a ban ever. But man, there were some really strong nominees here for Warlock as a whole.
Yeah, if we don't talk about the banned cards, like, you can make a case for any of those 3 cards being more powerful than a lot of the other cards revealed or released for any of the other classes even. Like, Touch of the Nathrazim, dude, was like our 5th option, and it was like, it is so much better than so many of these other cards that we've been talking about today. Like, oh god, Warlock forever and always. Life touch or life tap is busted. It makes all these cards absolutely insane.
Yeah, when you give the class with the best hero card or the best hero power good cards, like it becomes good.
Yeah. Whoa, surprise. I feel like there's a lot of like not very much hype for some of these announcements for the winners because they're just they're the most busted cards, right? Like how are we not gonna claim the card that enabled the most broken card in maybe or broken deck in Wild history as like the most broken card for Warlock? So I feel like there's a little bit of anticlimactic announcements here, but I mean they are what they are, right? So let's move into Warrior. Speaking of they are what they are, Warrior was a one-trick pony this entire year. Pirate Warrior's a good deck, guys. With the quest, non-Reno, non-odd variant, obviously, because those decks are bait. I don't know who would be baited by that, but yeah, Pirate Warrior's a thing, and so we have 4 nominations here, and they are all pirate related. Surprise, surprise. So we have the quest itself. We have Raid the Docks. We have Bloodsail Deckhand, which somehow got buffed because
Thank God they buffed that.
I
Yeah.
know it was seeing
Very
zero
necessary.
play beforehand. This is the 1 mana 2/2 discount your weapon. We have Harbor Scamp. This is the 2 mana 2/2 pirate that draws you a pirate. And then Defias Cannoneer came out in the mini set from United and Stormwind. That is a 3 mana 3/3. When you swing your Ankar, not only do you draw a card, but you also do 2 more cannon shots. So with these 4 pirates, I think, like I was just mentioning with Warlock, you kind of have to give the nod to the quest that kind of pushes the deck over the top. Should be kind of no surprise here that Raid the Docks is going to take the crown here for the most powerful warrior card of the year. And it's kind of crazy that we were saying there's no way Pirate Warrior would play this because you don't want to play you don't want to play your 1-drop on 1. No way. Yeah.
I mean, in our defense, Pirate Warrior would be an extraordinary deck without Raid the Docks. I think that the part that we missed, though, was the intermediate steps. The first step is draw the best card in your deck. The second stage is like replicate some of the best cards in your deck in ship's cannon shots. And then the final stage is, give up the board and deal infinite damage, basically, like gain inevitability and make the board irrelevant is basically what it does. And that's what Pirate Warrior and the cannon shots kind of do. Is the reason that it's bullied out so many decks is that it just kind of makes the board irrelevant at a certain stage in the game.
Yeah, I feel like Warrior was probably possibly the most obvious class when we were going through. I was like, of course it's like Raid the Docks. But yeah, this was an absolute one trick throughout. The Raid the Docks is being able to almost single-handedly like push out other warrior cards that were very, very strong. Something that we had as an honorable mention was Rakara, like the OG Rush Rakara. I feel like that's gonna get lost as how good that card was. That was a really, really, really good card in normal Pirate Warrior, but it doesn't have the pirate tag, which sadly makes it basically irrelevant in current warrior decks. But you know what? You can be a one-trick class warrior because it's a hell of a trick. Yeah. So keep doing that.
No, stop doing it.
Maybe they will soon. Maybe. Fingers crossed, right?
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at some of the neutral cards. We did get a lot of neutral cards, and even with the core set, we got quite a few good neutral cards introduced in addition to those from the expansion. But we were able to narrow it down to about 6 of them. To begin with, we have, of course, the 2/4 Watch Post in its original form. Did a lot. We talked about that quite a bit. Blade Master Samuro, Battlegrounds Battlemaster, Drek Thar, which has recently been released, the pre-nerf Crab Rider, and Armor Vendor, which is kind of just a staple in nearly any slow deck in the format. It's kind of replaced Mistress of Mixtures as like that good 1-drop in the early game. And that said, the winner ends up being the pre-nerf Crab Rider. I think it's maybe a little bit difficult to remember just how disgusting this card was when it was first released. First of all, like every Paladin deck wanted to run this because it did so many different things. And then Paladin decks could buff it so readily, whether it's on board or in hand. really taking advantage of Wind Fury in a way that we hadn't seen before until then Battlegrounds Battlemaster. So like Crab Rider was like a single card Battlegrounds Battlemaster. It didn't need support, and then you could just rip that thing out of your deck with the unnerfed Call to Arms to like the card was just an absolute terror for like a while. And it's part of the reason why both Tax Paladin and Hand Buff Paladin reigned supreme for, a period of time each until they ended up getting nerfed each. But like, yeah, the card was outrageous.
Yeah, even something like Murloc Shaman as well. That was like a big part of that early success as well. But before it kind of got lost, like I said, it was such an incredible card because it could be both a single card win condition, basically. Like the sticks on the board, you buff it, they can't kill it, you buff it again, the opponent blows up. Or it could just be this really nice recovery card. It's a 1/4 that had Rush and Wind Fury, so you could kind of like recover onto the board, make some value trades. It was just very flexible, either coming from behind or like going for the kill. And this guy kept on fitting into these various archetypes. So Crab Rider basically just being this one card win condition for many different decks. And with things like 1 mana conviction running around as well, that made a huge difference.
Yeah. I will say, unlike a lot of these class discussions that we were talking about where there was a very obvious winner, the neutral cards was a lot closer. I think we all were narrowed down to 2, and it just happened that Crab Rider was shared among all 3 of our top 2s, which is why we ultimately had it as our winner. But it was really close. Like the 2/4 Watch Post was it solved / created problems in our format at the same time. Like it was that good of a card. Not just in Paladin, right? We've been talking about this Tax Paladin deck for a lot of the show because it was very powerful, but even like it was being shoved in every slow deck because it was a way to slow down the aggression of stuff like Dark Glare and these aggro decks. And it was a very, very good card at doing that because it was hard to remove. And then Samuro specifically keep coming back to Paladin because they can buff the Samuro, right? And hand buff Paladin. And I think Samuro was that big tipping point for hand buff Paladin. We talked about Alliance Bannerman and cards like that, but I think the inclusion of Samuro was like one of the big reasons why hand buff Paladin became a dominant force, because of the ability to just, I can soak up a couple of turns and afford to buff my minions because then I have this card Samuro that will just clear the board and then I can do whatever I want to do. And then Battlemaster, dude, both forms of Battlemaster, 5 and 6, were both like, they're gross. It's gross. Giants should not have Wind Fury, and the ability to give it Wind Fury on a neutral card is gross. But yeah, I mean, neutral, it was hard. These are all very, very good cards, but I think we are all very happy with our Crab Rider decision, and I think we would all be very happy with the decision to unnerf it as well. Yeah, maybe. Roffle hates all Paladin cards, dude.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm learning out is you just want everything reverted, right?
I like powerful cards. I just like them all to be equally powerful. You know?
Okay, yeah.
The thing I didn't like about Crab Rider is I liked it in a board-based mirror versus like a control deck or a combo deck because it like kept them honest. It required them to have an answer to it. I hated it for the same reason I hated Call to Arms, which was like it just decided board-based mirror. It's like who has the first, who has the most, who has the last. Crab Rider wins that game, and like it was not a fun experience in the same way that Call to Arms Paladin mirrors were like the bane of my existence.
Yeah, to be fair, if any of these cards aren't kind of causing at least some sort of reaction of God, I hated that, then it probably doesn't deserve to be on this list. Like that's what we're doing when talking about the most powerful cards. Like they're the cards that they're obviously just a little bit too busted, and they do kind of require that sort of reaction. But yeah, like I had Watch Post there in my top 2. Like I think 2/4 Watch Post is bonkers, but I mean we all had different cards. Like as you said, Crab Rider was kind of just universally seen as being one of the best 1 or 2 cards among the neutrals. But dude, it was like there's a lot that happened this year. There's a lot of powerful cards that happened in Wild. Demon Hunter excluded.
Poor Demon Hunter. All right. We'll use that as transition to talking about our strongest decks of the year. So this is kind of our last award here when it comes to power level. And so we have some pretty clear nominees because you might have been listening to the show and you might hear these deck names that we keep talking about keep popping up. So, and they all kind of dominated their own respective portion of the year as well. So prior to Forge the Barons, I think we talked about Darkler Warlock being the most dominant deck, which is why the the inclusion of stuff like Watchpost and Weblords became really impactful. But Darkler Warlock with 2 mana 2/3 Darkler, 8 mana Flesh Giants, and stuff like that, very powerful deck. We do have the 2 Paladin decks that we've been talking about a lot here. We had Tax Paladin with unnerved Crab Riders, Convictions, Hand of Adals, that 2/4 Watchpost, Call to Arms, the 1/3 Sword with Omayogs. Obviously, a lot of cards that got nerfed in that deck. And then Handbuff Paladin. So I think Handbuff Paladin was like the first out of these sets of decks that I'm talking about that we actually got to see like VS stats on about just how powerful it was. And when we saw those stats, it was, I think, 57% win rate, which was 57% doesn't sound extremely high, guys, but 57% is absolutely absurd.
It was 3% higher than the next best deck, which is Darkglare Warlock, which 3% is also doesn't seem like a lot, but that is a massive difference when we're talking about the sample size of decks or of a population like we get from a VS report.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't seen, I don't think, a win rate that high since like basically like the very infancy of the wild reports, like probably among the first like 5 or so, when the win rates for a lot of the best decks were a little bit higher because the format was just a bit more unrefined. But yeah, Handbuff Paladin was right up there because it was completely busted.
Yeah.
Like, it was absolutely insane.
Yeah, Handbuff Paladin was that insane, and then he got nerfed like 5 or 6 times, right? We had Hand of Adal, Conviction, Crab Rider. I think First Day of School got hit a couple times as well. So it very quickly fell back to earth, but when it had its time in the sun, it was a absolutely dominant deck. And then, of course, we have to talk about Demon Seed, right? Because United in Stormwind came out. Demon Seed had its time, where time in the sun, but it was a very dark time in the sun because everybody hated it. There were the 2 different versions. We had the Dark Glare Giant version of Demon Seed, and then we had the Fatigue version that eventually popped up with Expired Merchants and Hand of Gul'dans. And then once those eventually got nerfed, we ended up with that trifecta of decks that when we did our podcast episode on that, we said we have never seen anything like it before. Right, we've never seen 3 decks that were as dominant compared to the rest of the field when we were talking about Odd Quest Hunter, Quest Pirate Warrior, and the variants of Evenlock, right? They were so far and above everything else in the format that I kind of wanted to lump them together because while they were not independently the most powerful deck at their time, right? You could argue a little bit there. They, as a group, were so much further ahead of everything else that we kind of wanted to include them in this discussion. But that being said, I think there is a very clear winner here when it comes to the strongest deck of the year, and that has to go to the Demon Seed decks, right? Demon Seed, Quest, Warlock. And then at that point, we kind of had a little bit of an argument of which version of the deck was maybe the most dominant out of the 2. And I think we ultimately settled on this Darkglare Giant version of Demon Seed being the most dominant version of the deck. And so I believe that version included the Battle Masters as well, with 8 mana Flesh Giants and everything like that. But yeah, those were not memories that I enjoyed looking back on when we were coming up with this list. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody has any qualms with the Demon Seed being that best deck of the entire year.
No, like I was leaning more towards in the hand buff direction when just because of like again it was unlike anything we have ever seen in the data before, but like part of that consideration is that it excelled while not being very popular. So like it was kind of like a lower end of the popularity in terms of meta decks while just being absolutely dominant there. And I think the Demon Seed was a little bit unique in that it was far and away the most popular deck while also seemingly having a phenomenal win rate. But like those two things kind of work in opposition with one another because like playing against like the deck's going to do worse if it plays against itself frequently. So like the fact that Demon Seed could boast a pretty good win rate while facing itself, it was facing itself 40% of the time too. So like that's kind of a ridiculous thing. So it was like, yeah, it was just a disgusting deck. I'm glad it's gone. We're not in. If you consider the 3 decks that replace it, we're not in that different of a scenario where we're still probably at about 40% of the top 3 decks in the format right now. But like, I don't know. At least that deck's gone. I guess is a is a good thing because it's basically taking an established deck in Dark Glare, giving it a brand new ridiculous piece of inevitability alongside it. It kind of did the same thing that the quest line did for Pirate Warrior. It bolstered an established deck that was already good on its own, gave it incremental steps that like work towards the same game plan that it's already looking for in cheating out giants, and then just give it top end inevitability so that like it narrows that window of games that are or how long games last.
Yeah, I'm looking back at a tweet I had on August 17th. So just like a couple weeks after it came out, the Stormwind set. And it's a screenshot of my HS replay stats of like 200 games, my most recent 200. And I played against 60% Warlock in about 200 games. And it was all basically the one deck. The Fatigue version didn't really exist at the time. It was all just Giants, Seed, Warlock. So that was 60% of the meta that I was versing. And I captured it Never Forget. Because I feel like it is easy to forget just how dominant and how absolutely absurd this was. This was pretty much unprecedented. Hand of Paladin was like Roffle was saying, it wasn't that popular. It was like 5% of the format when it was at its peak. And there's such a big difference. Yeah, and there's just such a big difference between like a deck doing, incredibly well at that popularity versus that 60% of the format. It was absurd. Like every day I would check VS stats and look at the class win rates, and every other class from what I remember was like basically tanking below 50%. And every day the Warlock win rate would just keep going up, even though the Mirror was becoming more and more popular. It was insane. And I think it's a very worthy winner. And I think it is one of the absolute best decks of all time, even including the stuff that got like emergency nerfed, whether it's like the initial Odd Demon Hunter, or if you want to talk about Snip Snap Warlock or anything. I would put Giant Demon Seed up against anything that has ever existed in Hearthstone. So, big congrats.
Yeah, very, very noteworthy accolades there. It kind of surprised me when I looked back and we were like talking about Tax Paladin and Handbuff Paladin, because I remember them being like not very good compared to Giant Demon Seed Warlock. But then when you looked at them in their respective meta, they were like oppressive, which kind of tells you like how insane Giant Demon Seed Warlock was, and kind of how happy I am at least that it got banned. I know there are some conversations of maybe we should have seen the nerfed version of the quest first before it got banned, but I think ultimately looking at that power level of the unnerfed version, I'm not mad that it is gone. I'm very happy. Even the Fatigue version, right? The Fatigue version I think was worse than the Giant Demon Seed build, but was still kind of just gross, right, when it came to everything else in the format. So yeah, Giant Demon Seed are just kind of Demon Seed Warlocks in general. I think very easily take the cake for strongest decks of the year. I think it's time that we stop talking about these disgusting Demon Seed decks and talk about just kind of maybe our favorite decks of the year. Maybe a little bit of a change of pace. So Roffle, you wanna go first with your favorite decks?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm gonna start with the Wailing Caverns era Reno Shaman. It's nice to like actually be able to play my goofy tech shaman and actually win games with it, simply because of the strength of Primal Dungeoneer drawing the Flurgle Toxfin combo, as well as a handful of other things. Like there's a time when we thought things were going pretty fast after Forge in the Barrens, with like the abundance of Dark Glare Warlock and Secret Mage, and Shaman helped slow things down a little bit. Like there's a brief period where Mutanus was actually relevant because you had Reno Mirrors and you could eat value, not necessarily combo pieces, and reduce the opponent's hand size because you were, working towards the same like accumulating resources game plan, and like that was fun. I miss that.
What a time! Yeah,
yeah.
Imagine.
The next one is a little bit more recent in Evenlock. I've always really liked Handlock, like the manipulating your life total, balancing. The risk reward of reducing your life total to get giants down early while not like leaving yourself exposed to burst damage. So I'm talking just straight even lock. Get your Reno Jackson out of my deck. I want to make giants, and I want to bash my opponent in the face with them. I want this game ending on turn 6, turn 5 if I have the coin with Battleground Battlemaster. So I really enjoyed that. I had like this ridiculous run from like a new season reset to Diamond 5. It took me like an hour and a half, and I had like an 86-7% win rate with the deck, just straight cruising. And it's one of the few like high tier decks that I actually enjoyed playing for an extended period of time. And then finally, and this may just be the recency bias, but like the Cthulhu Druid that Martian came up with Guff has been one of my favorite decks in a very long time.
Nice.
I see a lot of potential for this deck in doing things with Yogg shenanigans. Like I think it has the defensive tools to stall out like both Odd Hunter and Pirate Warrior a bit, and then just like getting multiple Cthuns is just fun. Like, and I want to do it with Yoggs, I want to do it with Jades, I want to do it with all kinds of nonsense to where like I don't know, this is just the new way to build like non-combo Druid decks now, I think so. Or slow Druid decks. So Control Druid is maybe the real deal, and right now this is my favorite deck.
I'm so happy to hear that, because yeah, I'm so happy to hear that because we talked about it last week, I feel like, and I was like, Roffle, you got to try this. Like, you got to try Cthulhu Druid. I feel like you're gonna love it. So, yeah, no, but it is very cool. Like, I'm very happy and that's something that you like.
And I played it for a few hours, I think, and again, 70% win rate. Like, it was actually the real deal. I felt like I could not lose against Odd Hunter in particular. Like, you just stack armor and say go. It felt like a slower, more painful death for the Odd Hunter than Lost in the Park Druid, but like kind of that similar game plan where like kind of just extending an arm and like, you can't hit me, and that's satisfying.
Yeah, low key, I think that Cthulhu Druid is a top tier deck in this expansion. Like, I think that deck is actually, you're saying Evenlock was one of the few meta decks, and I was like, you have Cthulhu Druid on your list. Like, that deck is also top tier meta. Like, you also enjoy this one. So, I mean, I guess I'll go with my favorite decks next, and I had Tax Paladin as one of my favorite decks just because I like making people play fair in this format where everybody is trying to do unfair things. So stuff like Weblords and Watchpost are some of my favorite cards to exist in the format, and I absolutely love it. And it got a whole bunch of new cards with Drekthar and Lightforged Cariel and Iron Deep Trog in this expansion. So it's been a lot of fun. Like Roffle, I really enjoyed the Dark Moon Races Shaman decks. Not Dark Moon Races, the
Wailing Caverns
with Primal Engineer. Because very similar to Roffle, like I've always loved Shudderwalk. Shudderwalk has always sucked. And so when Primal Engineer gave me the ability to play a Shudderwalk Shaman that didn't suck, I absolutely loved it, enjoyed it. I think all the wild streamers went through a period of like 3 weeks of playing nothing but Shaman because we had never been able to do that before, and it was really good and it was really fun. Unlike Roffle, I also really loved Renos in my Evenlocks because I like Roffle. Handlock was the very first deck that I played. So like the Demon Handlocks back in Blackrock Mountain with Void Callers and Mal'Ganis and Doomguards. And so that was one of my favorite decks of all time. And so like Evenlocks and stuff like that have always appealed to me, but also Reno cards have always appealed to me, and Gul'dan has always appealed to me. And so when you just shove them all together and you get a really, really good deck that was pretty decent into the meta, absolutely love that. And last but not least, I had to talk about Even Hunter, just because it's a deck that I've been a fan of for a very, very long time. I think it's a very low-key, underrated deck that people should be playing way more of, especially if you're queuing into stuff like Ignite Mages and Combo Druids and stuff like that. I think it's a very, very, very good deck. But if I had to pick a favorite, I think it would have to be the Tax Paladins. Just like I mentioned, Weblords and Watchposts are some of my favorite cards of all time, and absolutely love them. and I like just making people play fair, because when they play fair, they hate it, and the salty messages and stuff like that's one of my favorite parts of playing Tax Paladin.
Would you believe that I played Tax Paladin about a year or maybe 6 months before like it was actually a thing?
I know. You're the prophet, right? Because you also did Tax Demon Hunter too.
Yeah, 5 mana Call to Arms, and I was still just rocking. Like I had I had a bunch of weird
You
stuff
had
in it.
Mana
Like,
Rays in there, if I remember correctly,
yeah,
right?
that's the one. Mana Wraith was getting pulled in there because we didn't have Watch Post back in my day.
Beautiful, beautiful. That I think that's mainly the fact that I love Tax Paladin so much is why I'm like so adamant for like a Crab Rider or a Conviction on Nerf, because the moment you give me one of those two back, I think Tax Paladin's like top tier deck, which would make me so happy. So I'm a monster though, so that's also true.
All right, let's wind this up. Going to my favorite decks of the year. Honorable mention, Darkglare Warlock. I've always been a huge Darkglare fan. So I specifically like the versions that were probably pre-quest. But yeah, always a big fan of that deck, especially once we got like Backfire and it felt much more consistent stuff. So like that. But at number 3, I had Stormwind APM Mage. The deck was a bit weaker at the time. But you could play if you want to be a bit of a hipster. Number 2, I have Alterac Valley, APM Mage. This is the Drekthar version that's kind of out right now. I'm going to do a whole bunch of really incredible broken stuff, but it's been nice to have that art a bit revitalized. And number 1, I have Barons, APM Mage, as my favorite deck of the year. So there we go. That is my list.
I think I'm sensing a trend here with your favorite decks. I'm not really sure what it is, but I think there's some commonality.
No, I see no pattern.
Nah, it all looks reasonable to me, Meowth.
What happens if you wake up on Tuesday and your Sorcerer's Apprentice has been hit? Not saying it's gonna happen, but what happens if you wake up on Tuesday and it's gone?
What happens?
Christmas
I mean,
is
obviously
canceled.
we can. Yeah, Christmas is cancelled. We can never have Conviction back. We can never have Crab Rider back. I'll hold you personally accountable for every time you've ever said the words "nerf the girl." So I'm gonna have to go through and tally that up, Mouth. I don't know. To be honest, like I don't actually mind when my favorite decks kind of get nerfed. Like if it's for the greater good, I had my time. I had great fun with it, but I'll never have an issue with a deck that I like getting targeted personally if lots of people have issues with it. And hey, there's a lot of really good reasons to have issues with Apprentice. It's just I happen to have lots of fun with it. So no, I think my actual favorite version was the Barons, like if being serious, the Springwater stuff was really, really cool. I liked that deck. It came when it first came out. It was the first time I ever really had mained a deck, like non-stop for a couple weeks. Like I don't tend to do that very much. But for someone that was a total boomer, and it took me some time to kind of learn and very much bullied by my chat to get used to playing APM Mage. By the end of it, I felt really, really good about it. It's one of my favorite archetypes ever. And yeah, I'm really genuinely happy that it's kind of popped up back in the format a bit, even if it's under some controversial conditions right now.
We won't hop into all of that, okay? Can't ruin these beautiful awards with that.
Okay.
Every time Corbett mentions his like favorite decks to play, I just like look at it and I'm just like, how the heck are we friends? Like how have we gotten along for this extended period of 2 years on a podcast when your favorite deck
he really makes it difficult, doesn't he?
I know, you make it really difficult to be friends with you when you say APM Mage and Darkglare Warlock as your favorite decks.
Yeah. Let me talk about Quest Mage. Oh, that deck.
Oh
Wow.
god, I hate you. Anyways, I think that's going to wrap it up for our awards here, but we do have one left, and I think that is going to go to the audience, those of you guys that listen, for the best community, best podcast audience out there. Appreciate you guys sticking with us for another year of podcasting. We have done 74 episodes of The State of Wild, which is absolutely insane. Like, how far we've come, and it's all thanks to you guys that listen, and I really do appreciate you guys. And of course, shout outs to Roffle and Corbett for being an amazing co-host. This would not be fun. I would not be doing it for 74 episodes if it weren't for you guys. So shout outs to Roffle and Corbett as well. And speaking of, do you guys want to shout out to the audience where they can find you guys and your content over the next couple of weeks?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at RoffleHS and Twitch and YouTube at Roffle.
And you can find me at Corbettgames, all those platforms. But before we just completely wrap up, I just want to, again, say a big thank you to Roffle for, coming to join the show with me out and I. Like, it's all about how long I've been doing the show, but it's also been so much, as great as Meowth is, and as great as I am, obviously. It's been so much more fun having Roffle here. I think that he constantly brings up these incredible points and is so sort of eloquent with everything he's talking about, and this sort of really, really well rounds the discussion. So thank you so much, Roffle, for coming and joining both of us doing the show, and I'm sure everyone appreciates it. That's a fan of the episodes and all of that. So thank you so much.
Well, yeah, thank you guys for having me. I didn't like. It feels like we've been doing this so long. I didn't even realize that like I joined this year. That was the thing that happened.
The best part of the Hearthstone year in Wild was Roffle joining the State of Wild podcast.
I didn't even think about that. But yeah, we didn't bring that up at all. But like, yeah, thank you guys for joining me, and thank you to the listeners for accepting me. I know it's like bringing a third person on could be a bit of a change in tone. Maybe has some of the conversations go on a little bit longer as a result of three people sharing their opinion. But thank you all for bearing it out and allowing us to kind of have some fun together, because I've been enjoying it thoroughly. So
yeah. So like you mentioned, and I think we've all said multiple times, appreciate you guys for listening, and thanks for listening to 48 episodes this year, and thanks for listening all the way through this one as well. I hope you guys enjoyed these recap episodes. These ones are always really fun to do. Just take a kind of walk down memory lane of all the broken cards that came out this year, all the broken decks, all the cards that got nerfed and buffed and banned. And hopefully we'll be doing this again next year when it comes down to a 2022 recap. But yeah, thanks again for watching all the way to the end. Just a reminder, there will be no episode next week, as we will be taking it off for the holidays. So happy holidays to all of you guys that are celebrating, and hope you guys enjoy the time with your family, and we will see you guys again in 2 weeks. Later.